Good afternoon. I hope you all are having a great first day of the 2018 Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. My name is TJ Srivanyapuram, and I am a second-year MBA student at MIT Sloan. And I'm pleased to introduce our panel, Downstream, the future of OTT in sports. We have a pretty incredible lineup of panelists today, starting with Burke Magnus, the Executive Vice President of Programming and Scheduling at ESPN, Ed Desser, the President of Desser Sports Media, Laura Froelich, the Head of Global Sports Partnerships at Twitter, and the panel will be moderated by Abe Madkour, the Executive Editor of the Sports Business Journal. The panel will be about 40 minutes, with 5 minutes of Q&A at the end. So use the hashtag OTT in sports, and we'll select your questions and get them up there. Thanks.
All right, thanks. Give it up for TJ. Great job. Nicely done. So we have the unenviable task of following following the president, right? So I think we're going to try to make it as entertaining and as fun as we can in terms of taking this topic, the future of OTT in sports, entertaining. One thing he said that we all agreed upon: if these people are talking in language you do not understand, just ask. Ask questions at any time, and I'll ask them of the panelists. So the future of OTT in sports. Let's start with this for the panel. Just where are you in the future of sports media? Where do you think this is all going? What will be the experience for all of us in the room when it comes to sports media in, say, 2025? Burke, start with you.
Oh, that's a simple question, Abe. I have the answer right here.
That's why I went to you.
Yeah. Well, it's nice that you started with like the most gigantic, unanswerable question that you could possibly.
I ask the questions you're supposed to answer.
I'm sorry.
Please.
By the way, it's nice to see you again on another panel. You're getting quite accomplished in your moderation.
This is when he doesn't know the answer. So Ed, let's go to you.
Perfect.
I was waiting for what Burke was going to say.
It worked.
Mission accomplished. No, listen, I would say it truly is crystal ball territory, and I maintain that today, and I think the same will be true, over the next decade. But today, unquestionably, is the greatest moment in history to be a sports fan, right? You have some of the most accomplished, biggest, most successful companies, not just media companies, but companies in the world sitting around discussing and trying to innovate and develop great new products to serve sports fans content in different ways. Some of them will potentially replace, legacy models and legacy experiences. Some of them will be complementary or additive. But we haven't really come anywhere near the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, in terms of sports content delivered to fans through technology. So it's not a specific answer, but what I'm suggesting is that is continuing to develop and to expand at a rapid pace, and all of it will ultimately be to the benefit of fans, both through large scale distribution models, through narrow channels to serve the platinum sports properties all the way down to the most niche. And at ESPN we take the position that we always need to be in a position to lean into that development and to lead into that innovation. Throughout our history, that's been how we've succeeded, and we're going to try to continue to do that. But it's frenetic right now, but all to the benefit of fans ultimately.
Ed, Laura, go ahead. Ed.
I think I second it. I think that we have seen this act before, though. If for those of you who are maybe a little bit older than the people that the president was referencing earlier, who remember the days before cable was the place that all sports resided, we saw a sea change back then when sports had only been principally on broadcast television, and over a course of about 10 years, broadcast television didn't disappear from the sports landscape, but rather it complemented cable, or cable complemented it is probably the better way to state it at the time, though that is now reversed. And I think what we're going to see with the new platforms is a similar kind of evolution where certain properties move, where other properties stay put, where particular properties are seen, is not the same kind of one-stop shopping that we have become used to. Traditionally, if all you needed was a cable or satellite subscription and you got everything. It was easy. You didn't need to buy a streaming service. You didn't need to put up an antenna. And so it's not going to be as easy to get everything in the future, but you will have the opportunity to get much more than you used to get. Just like, in 1979 when ESPN started and people were wondering whether it was possible to fill a 24/7 channel with sports, well, we found out the answer was a resounding yes, and many times over. Well, we won't be able to fill up the internet, but we will be able to get quite a bit more programming to fans. So it will be a boon for fans, no doubt.
Laura? What do you
Absolutely.
think?
So I was at a conference not too long ago, and Pam Eel from the NBA said something that I like to steal with pride all the time. She said, it used to be that less is more. Well, now more is more. There is definitely, like you said, so much more choice. Linear TV, as many channels as we have, they still have limited shelf space. So at Twitter, we're excited to be a complement to that, to our partners on broadcast TV, because just because you are a fan of a sport or an athlete that isn't on TV doesn't make you any less avid of a fan. You still want to watch. And so we at Twitter are excited to take the conversation that we see happening on the platform, see what people are super passionate about, and complement that conversation with content from our partners. And what our partners are able to do is super creative things that perhaps they don't do in other channels. So for example, our friends at ESPN had a college football ranking show this past season, and after the weekly rankings were announced on air, they then went to Twitter for an hour show called Rankings Reactions, where Mike Golick Jr. Hosted the show in his living room, and he had a variety of special guests come join him. And the conversation around each week's rankings, obviously, every fan had an opinion that they wanted to see what their fellow fans on Twitter thought. And so, we can supplement what's happening in the linear space, and we can also do new and creative things that we've never seen before.
So, and my man in the back, the clock isn't working, just as an FYI. So, but the ecosystem that we've been looking at for years, for all of us, has been based on big media companies paying major millions, billions of dollars for sports rights, which has really been underwriting the sports revenue model. Is that at risk in this new system? And Ed, I'll look to you as you consult with teams and leagues on such an issue.
Well, there's no question that the system is under some strain that it hasn't seen heretofore. I suspect that when the models that Burke's colleagues were creating 5 or 10 years ago projected into the future, they didn't anticipate this thing called cord cutting because it hadn't really existed. And for the first few years, it barely existed. And so, now there has been a noticeable amount of loss. But in the broader scheme of things, we're talking about, something of the order of 10%, which while material, certainly in a business anything like ESPN, is not a decisive blow, and is certainly not going to put them out of business. It just requires that they modify their behavior, maybe make some changes, and they will evolve and adapt. And proof in the pudding is, they're now about to launch ESPN Plus, so they want to get, yet a third revenue stream in addition to the cable subscription fees and in addition to advertising. So there will be a separate monetization opportunity. So this is part of the ecosystem that we're living in, and it's how ultimately the sports properties that I represent will now have a decision matrix that's a lot more complicated. It's great for consultants, let me tell you, because they'll need to try and grapple with this. But it's just part of the nature of this business, and it always has been. And that's the point I was making a little bit earlier. This has always been a process of going through and looking across a series of alternatives and figuring out which of those that are best matched to ultimately serve the property and serve the property's fans.
Real quick, in this audience, raise your hand if you subscribe to a traditional cable or satellite package. Raise your hand high, please. Okay, that's strong. Raise your hand if you subscribe to a singular OTT subscription service for sports, please. Okay, so Burke and Laura, when you assess the room and the hands, what does that tell you in terms of the makeup right now? I mean, people are doing both. It looks
Yeah, it confirms what we already knew to be the case, which was that at this current moment in time, most people are treating the over-the-top experience as a supplemental experience to traditional multi-channel distribution. And I was encouraged to see so many hands in both categories, frankly, because to Ed's point, I think this is not a zero-sum conversation. This is very similar, frankly, to the evolution from broadcast to cable, analog to digital, cable to online, online to mobile, mobile to whatever's next, OTT, we're here to talk about today, and direct to consumer. So, this is, an evolution, not a revolution, and I think there's going to be a lot of different ways that the companies and leagues, properties, and fans can participate and to benefit.
And so for the audience, ESPN Plus, you come out with a price point, I believe it's $4.99, launching in about April, May of 18. Give us an update on where you're at and what it will be.
Yeah, so what the design there is, I think everybody knows that the Walt Disney Company took controlling interest of a company called BAMTech, which spawned out of Major League Baseball originally, and is one of the premium technology providers and technology innovators in the sports space, certainly, but they do work well beyond the sports space. So Disney now controls that entity, and the first thing out of the gate for the Walt Disney Company will be a sports direct-to-consumer product called ESPN Plus. All of that is being done simultaneously to a complete redesign of the ESPN app experience, and ESPN Plus will sit inside the ESPN app as everybody knows it currently, right? So there'll now be 3 pillars to the ESPN app experience. One will be a universe of what I'll call free content, which is short-form highlights, standings, scores, news, etc. There'll be the authenticated stream of the ESPN linear networks tied to your multi-channel subscription, and there'll be the ESPN Plus product, which will be a direct-to-consumer product that will offer more games and original content and archive access to other product for a discrete subscription.
Which I could subscribe to without being a subscriber to.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah,
so I could pay for the $4.99 out just on its own.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And the content is unique to ESPN Plus. It'll be about 10,000 live events. There'll be original films and series. There'll be original studio franchises, and there'll be really kind of the ultimate sports archive or library, if you will, kind of highlighted by the fact that ESPN Plus will be the only source that you can access every single 30 for 30 film that's ever been made. So there's about 100 of them. 1 through 100 will be there and only there. And I looked at the list the other day because I was curious. I happen to have very fond memories of a lot of the films, but I didn't come close to recalling all of them. And I looked at the list and it just made me want to watch a bunch of them again and to get a couple that I hadn't seen before. On demand, easy access to that entire library. There'll be a hallmark of ESPN Plus.
Laura and Ed, it's a big bet. It's one of the biggest stories in sports media people are watching. What are you paying attention to in terms of the launch of ESPN Plus? Either one. Like, what are you looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I I am excited to see the ESPN Plus capitalize on the trends that we've been talking about, right? I mean, I think it's the fandom is ripe for it, so I'm super excited to see how it does.
You know, my question is going to be, you know, how will ESPN Plus differentiate itself from the other ESPN services? Clearly, you know, it starts out with no subscribers, so
That will be different.
well, maybe not that different from 1979, but different from today. But you know, therefore, it will have to. It'll have to be a different animal to start with, and it may evolve in a different direction. But it seems to me that the question is, you know, sure, it's a great place to have archives of all kinds of programming, but for what programming is it going to be, you know, the primary source? So, for example, we're aware that you've done a deal with Major League Soccer for the MLS out-of-market package. So, you know, I don't know, can we expect more out-of-market packages, or what kind of programming do you think fits in that model?
Yeah, I think from a live event perspective, and the answer is right. We did do a deal with MLS. Their direct kick product will be inside of ESPN Plus. It will be part of the $4.99 per month price. It will not be a price beyond that. So, you know, if you just start from there, if you're an MLS fan, you're getting a product that you previously paid $80 a season for. Now it's $4.99 a month, and in addition to that, there'll be, and I wish we could say a few of these things,
right.
but I've spent the better part of the last 8 months, me and my team, lining up a bunch of rights acquisitions, developing original content with Connor Shell and our content team, and getting everything ready to go. And once we have a confirmed launch date, which hopefully isn't that far away in the future, we're gonna start telling people exactly what they get. And the value proposition at $4.99 for a universe of live events that will be different and discrete and service niche categories and really broad categories too, like college sports and tennis and Major League Baseball and other things, will be, you know, will be a great complement to what they can get through their ESPN multi-channel subscription, or, as you noted, Abe, to just buy on its own.
So, Laura, and everything you know, you did the big deal on Thursday night a couple of years ago, and so the question now is like where Twitter will be active in the sports and where sports fits into the broader strategy of Twitter. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely.
And I know for a fact that European international content is a priority for you in the sports space, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, sports is the lion's share of conversation on Twitter. It makes sense because people come to Twitter because it is where things are happening and what people want to talk about in the moment. Sports lends itself beautifully to that. So over the years, we saw that incredible conversation building, and what it led us to do is form partnerships with all of the major leagues, teams, athletes, and broadcasters to bring their content to Twitter so that they could grow their audiences, access younger audiences, access global audiences. And so we've been partners with the NFL, as you mentioned, for many years, as well as many others. And our partnerships began with bringing video clip content to the platform. So we said, let's enhance the live conversation that's happening on the platform with video of you know, that Steph Curry dunk. If everyone's talking about it, why not actually have that highlight on the platform to drive the conversation even further? We also provide our partners the opportunity to make money with a proven monetization model of sponsorship. So our partners have been really pleased with how we've worked together thus far. And about a year and a half ago, that same conversation around how we can super serve sports fans on our platform led to, we've got the conversation, we've got the video highlights. What if we had the live events themselves on the platform, so we could have the live events streaming with the conversation all together in one place? And it's been incredibly successful for our partners who are looking to access new audiences. The fans get incredible content, and so everybody wins.
So, but is the future more in live event business for Twitter?
It's funny because people often say, you know, Twitter is getting into live, and I know they mean live streaming, but Twitter has always been live, right? So
But live streaming a full event is a little different than clips and highlights.
sure,
Right.
and the way we think about it is it's all part of one holistic experience for the fan. So whereas you might want to live stream our original show for the NBA, we have a show called The Warm Up to see what's going on around the league, both in terms of the games themselves as well as other aspects of the league. You can also check out the highlights during the games and have that be part of the conversation. It really is all about how the fan has only so much time, and they're very mobile in their lifestyles, as we know. And so what Twitter wants to do is to be able to serve that fan wherever they may be with the right content at the right time, whether that be live streaming or clips or replays of events and the whole gamut.
Ed, she touches on a good point, and a lot of questions speak to this, which we'll get to, but a lot of questions here about, you know, there are a lot of offerings, right? And there's a lot of questions here about it's getting complicated. And how does this become simplified? Will it become simplified? Or will all these OTT offerings kind of be out there and you have to subscribe to 10 or 15 different of them?
Well, it may very well be. You know, you think about how Google became prominent. Google became prominent by virtue of taking this complicated world of the internet and coming up with some very simple ways of accessing it. And you know, maybe there will be a Google of TV and a video, a definitive one. I mean,
So
there
a hub.
are a bunch of things out there at the moment, but I don't know that there's anyone that I would think is the TV guide of online sports yet. But you know, if it's a problem, someone will come up with a way of solving the problem because there'll be money in that. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. You know, yes, it's not going to be as simple as, you know, you get cable and you get everything and whatever it is that's on is going to be available. It will get more complicated, but with the complication will become, you know, a lot of improvements that aren't currently available. Just finding out what's on at any given time, you know, has become complicated. And to know that there's an event on right this moment that would be your favorite event. You know, think about the same sort of customization engines that Netflix has made very common. Imagine if that existed in sports. Imagine if you had the opportunity to either input a bunch of your favorites, your favorite team, your favorite player, your favorite coach, your favorite school, et cetera, and the optimization engine would spit out, you know, hey, the Celtics game is on in 10 minutes. You know, there's the possibility for much more use of the video that already exists before we add in the additional video through the use of technology that is still nascent.
Yeah, I would even say, you know, for years people said personalization isn't really working. It's too hard because people have to do so much work. On Twitter, we have the benefit of this treasure trove of data on our audience. We know what they're interested in. We know which handles they're following. We know what they're tweeting about. We know what they're searching for. We know what tweets they're seeing. So we have a pretty good sense of what they're going to be interested in. And what that lets us do is surface the kinds of content that we think they're going to really want to watch as fans.
But for Burke, when you're out there doing negotiations, already very difficult negotiations, don't these rights already complicate them just tremendously? I mean, if the property wants to say some bundle of rights for Twitter, some bundle of rights for Facebook Watch, some bundle of rights for somebody else or a new co, how do you protect yourself from that?
I mean, it's just been getting, you know, sequentially more complicated over the last decade or even more, right? And it's just a natural evolution of these deal-making processes. I mean, we are, you know, we buy comprehensive rights, which is not to suggest that, you know, take our partnership with the NBA. I mean, Adam has a vision for how NBA content can exist on social platforms,
he does.
digital platforms, and mobile platforms. And all of it underpins, at the end of the day, the live event, right? The live event exists above all. It is the top of the pyramid. It's what people will pay money for. It hasn't been, it's a singular experience. Hasn't been commoditized in a similar way that highlights have and other information has. And so ultimately, we have platforms, technologies, modes to acquire and disseminate rights of any kind, within, our proposition to rights holders.
Okay.
And we'll continue to approach things in that way, but we're not blind to the notion that leagues need to touch fans in a variety of different ways in a variety of different places in order to maintain the avidity of their fanship. And I think we would be foolish to suggest that, again, that's a zero-sum conversation, right? Where, ultimately, the more avid NBA fans there are, the better it is for ESPN, because currently there's 3 places you can watch NBA. Well, more than that, but
Take illegal streaming, there's probably a lot of places.
ESPN, Turner, ABC, NBA TV,
Your RSNs.
League Pass. I mean, that is a very narrow.
All those RSNs you
Yeah,
just bought.
yeah. Those are, but I'm talking from a national perspective on
Got it.
our core business. But that's where you're driving all the fans to, and that's where ultimately the value is.
Laura, I was here at Sloan 3-4 years ago where Commissioner Adam Silver said just that. He can't wait for the day where it's a close Sixers-Celtics game, 2 minutes left, go purchase. Purchase at 2 minutes left, maybe it's $5. I mean, are we closer to that?
I feel like we're closer than we've ever been. I feel like Twitter is is the perfect environment for that, given that people are coming to the platform in that time.
What would hold that up? E-commerce, a commerce transaction, or rights given up by the league? I mean, what would hold that
I
up?
think it's any number of things. We're definitely doing our due diligence, and we'll see where it goes.
Couple good questions here. We're moving fast, and I want to get to people's questions here. How will legalized gambling impact the demand for OTT or off? People are referring to this as off access. Is that a term that I'm not familiar with? Has anyone ever heard that?
I'm not familiar.
I'm not
Okay.
familiar.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got my glasses on. OTT access. My bad. Sorry, I am getting old. So how will legalized gambling impact demand for OTT? I mean, that's going to be...
I think it could be a huge boon for OTT. I mean, in my role, obviously, I work with partners all over the world in places where gambling is legal, and it's a huge boon for content folks who have OTT apps, because people want to know what's happening right now so that they can place their bets.
I could see a gambling angle, insider information within the ESPN Plus app, couldn't it potentially?
It's absolutely a place we intend to focus within ESPN Plus. We have a little product right now called ESPN Insider, which has been around for a long time on ESPN.com, and that is, albeit in a tiny sliver of data that we have with a one-to-one relationship with fans in that case, has instructed several areas that we're going to focus on for ESPN Plus. Gambling is one, recruiting, draft information, free agency, sort of the trade machine type experiences. All of those will become customized experiences within ESPN Plus, because we already know that super avids are willing to transact on that information.
We get a lot of local teams wanting to know if they should follow the Monumental Sports model, which is an OTT offering for a lot of Ted's teams. So this question, I think, goes to this, and Ed, I want you to address it. What's the most important part of an OTT offering? Price, number of platforms, or exclusive content? Like, what do you think really we should drive the decision there?
Are you talking about from the OTT platform's perspective or from the team's perspective?
I would take this as probably the property perspective.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from the property's perspective, there have been and continue to be two things that matter beyond all else. And depending on the property, it's either money or it's exposure. And I don't know very many properties, in fact, I can't think of one, that doesn't highly value both of those things. So, OTT is, you know, a paid platform, whether it's a subscription service or something else, these have existed before. There were RSNs that began their lives as subscription cable services like HBO that you paid for a la carte. Those pretty much went by the wayside because broad availability was important to teams, and not having a barrier to access, meaning having to pay a subscription fee, was important to subscribers. So the basic cable model of making things available to 80% of the homes became very common, and those RSNs got out of that business. So I would say, as you look at OTT, you have to look at, well, you know, what are my alternatives? You know, is there a broad distribution network that is willing to pay for my product because it drives audience, it keeps cable and satellite operators happy, it's something I can monetize through advertising, or do you have a very, very niche, very narrow audience that you can easily identify? You know, for example, surfing is a sport that does not lend itself very well to being on traditional television. The events could take place anywhere in a 3-month period. You don't know the time of day. You don't know which way the waves will be facing. It's an almost impossible sport to cover on television. But there are very hardcore surfing fans who would happily pay for key events that take place, you know, in the spring. And it's the sort of perfect thing for an OTT service. So it depends upon the product.
And they did a deal, World Surf did with who? Who did they do a deal with recently? Was it Facebook?
I believe so.
Yeah. So that was a good, so I'm sorry to interrupt, but finish up. So, but for you two, what's more important, exclusive content? I mean, do you want content exclusively, or is it whatever the content is? Because it speaks a little bit to the question, you know.
For us, the most important thing is content that we think is going to resonate with fans on Twitter, right?
So it doesn't have to be exclusive.
Not necessarily. It certainly is great when we can get it, but most importantly, it's content that is real time and capitalizes on the conversation that's happening.
You know, until the NFL had the audacity to take what was a Thursday night cable package and also sell it to network television, and then also sell it to Twitter and now to Amazon, these properties were almost always exclusive. Now, of course, you know, the rules are changing, and so, you know, exclusivity is a high bar. It limits the accessibility. It raises the price, and some things may not need to be exclusive in the future.
Good question here. How comfortable are your organizations with increasingly expensive content acquisitions that may even lose money? What goes into those models or decisions?
So for us, we have been, like I said earlier, working with our partners for many, many years. We've had a sponsorship model that's been extremely successful. So our partners have that track record of working with us. They know that we have the ability to monetize their content very successfully. So it's been a very easy and fruitful conversation.
And how does Twitter make money? I mean, how do you make money on those deals?
So we bring the content to our platform. We give advertisers the opportunity to advertise both within the live stream as well as distribute the highlight clips to their targeted audiences across Twitter. So let's say, for example, the example I was giving earlier, the NBA, there's an incredible dunk by Steph Curry. The NBA will tweet out that video highlight, but Verizon can have their pre-roll commercial in front of that video being tweeted out by the NBA, and Verizon can distribute that to, let's say, men 25 to 34 across Twitter. And so Verizon gets the brand benefit of association with the NBA's content. The NBA and Twitter get to make money from it, and fans get the incredible content. Well, and on the distribution aspect of it, what we've also found is that for our partners, it gets them access to new audiences, because when the advertiser is promoting the tweet to their targeted audiences, our research has shown us that about 90+% of the time, the people who are exposed to those tweets are not already following the content partner or the advertiser.
Burke, do you ever have to deal with that in terms of, you know, buying content that may end up or starting to be a loss leader? What goes into that thinking?
Well, I mean, nobody runs the table 100% of the time, but we're, our kind of the bets we've placed, at the high end, I think are pretty obvious to people. The NFL, Monday Night Football,
Right.
NBA, Major League Baseball. What I like to say is all things college, college football and college basketball, college football playoff. Tennis is a big category for us with 3 of the 4 Grand Slams, MLS soccer, and a couple other things. Listen, like I said, for us, live events are at the top of the food chain, right? I want to go back to something you asked previously about exclusivity, which, in terms of driving a subscription product in the OTT environment, I think exclusivity is going to prove to be essential, not optional. I mean, the way we're looking at it is that, and why we think we have, a little bit of a good or a good solution for rights holders is that we now have the ability to talk to people about distribution from an over-the-air broadcast network in ABC, 2 of the highest penetrated or the highest penetrated sports networks on cable television. We have a streaming service in ESPN3. We have the world's most popular and most trafficked app and mobile web environment and website, and now a direct-to-consumer product as well. So we're going to use the reach of our other platforms to transact with rights holders all the way down to the bottom of their inventory, some of which might end up on direct-to-consumer, or most of which might end up on a direct-to-consumer product, because they covet not only being a part of the ESPN ecosystem, but also getting access to the reach of our broader platforms. So to me, any hole in exclusivity, I don't want to overdo this because there'll be plenty of those examples that you could cite, but really we try to minimize the number of holes to exclusivity as it relates to the live event in order to get people to transact.
Question here, probably for Ed. Does this put the RSN business in peril? OTTs.
No, I mean, the RSN business is based upon the fact that within a region, there are a group of people who are very highly motivated to watch particular teams. There are 2 RSNs in the Boston market.
Right, but if Wick and
they
if
carry the 3 major teams, and I'm aware that those RSNs are extremely highly valued by the cable operators. You can't be a cable operator in New England and not carry those networks. It's not palatable.
let me rephrase the question. Do you think owners who have an entrepreneurial spirit will want to, instead of taking a big check from an RSN, want to build and develop and distribute something that they own and operate?
Well, there is tremendous attractiveness to having that consumer relationship. We heard about that in more than one session this morning.
Right.
That's something, when you think about running a sports team, it wasn't that long ago that you really had no idea who was listening to your broadcast, you didn't know who was watching your broadcast, you didn't know who was in your stadium, and you didn't know when they were in your stadium, whether they were eating, buying a t-shirt, or were no-shows. So that's the world. You talk about lack of data. That's how prehistoric the sports business was, roughly around the time that this conference started. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I'm only exaggerating a little bit. So the opportunity to have a customer relationship, be able to cross-market across platforms, is something that other businesses do as a matter of routine and hasn't been available in sports. So would that be attractive? Sure,
Right,
it's attractive.
right.
But if it means, look at the actual economics of running a sports franchise. You have a very, very expensive roster that you are paying guaranteed money. So it is extremely important that you figure out how you're going to recoup that. You get national television money, you get sponsorship, you get ticket sales, and you get local media. And some of those are variable and some of those are fixed, but your costs are almost entirely fixed. So there's a lot of attractiveness to getting a check from a regional sports network, which at the same time is in 80% of the homes, in your market, and has the benefit of also having, your competitors' programming on it, meaning the other teams in your market, in which there are cross-promotional promos to get people to watch your game.
Totally, I definitely see your point. So let's go less than 5 minutes, real quick. Go down the road a little bit. Buy, sell, or hold esports.
Oh, bye.
Too early to tell.
Hold.
Wow, so 3, interesting. I do want to get to this one real quick. So in a quick answer, Burke, is ESPN Plus meant to drive demand for the linear TV channels package? Is it meant
Is it meant to do that?
Yeah, is it meant to drive demand for the linear TV channels and package?
No, it's not meant to do that. It's meant to complement the linear TV package. I mean, I won't get into a longer answer because this is the lightning round, but no.
Yeah, no. Give a growth sport outside of esports that you think in North America is going to be really have much more popular in the next 5 years. Burke, start with you.
Rugby.
NBA. I'm calling it a growth sport.
You think it has that much growth left?
Yes.
Yeah, good.
I love all the answers Ed's given, by the way.
Right, because you have NBA programming.
Yes.
Yes.
WNBA.
W, interesting, I like that. Yes or no, NFL ratings drop another 10% next year?
Up or off?
Up. No, what I'm saying, NFL ratings will drop another 10% next year.
No.
No.
Maybe.
Maybe.
That's a hold, I guess, right?
That's all. Buy, sell, or hold UFC.
Hold.
Hold.
Sell.
Wow, interesting. Heard it here first, folks. All right, so let's end with this. They all go down, another brief one. Story in sports media, that everyone in the audience should be paying attention to. Maybe it's something we haven't talked about so far. What's a story over the next 12 to 16 months that you're really paying attention to in the sports media space? Burke, let's start with you.
I'd like to come up with a different answer, but because we've already touched on it, but I think without question it's legalized gambling.
And what is your guess on what the court will rule?
I think it'll come. It'll pass.
Open it up.
It'll be something that we become active on. I mean, I think the regulatory piece of it is the devil in the details. But and maybe I'm just being optimistic here, but I do believe that it's going to have an incredible impact on fan avidity in a number of ways, not just literally the money transactions on or wagering on games. I think the whole patina of it all will raise the value of sports content.
Real quick, there was a study that showed that engagement in sports viewership or content went up exponentially because, of course, people are so interested in the outcome based on their bet.
Right.
So, Ed.
Well, I'm actually watching the race to become the next president of ESPN, so maybe you could provide some insights. I'm kidding.
Where are you in that? Where's the company in that?
I will.
That's not fair. That's why I said it.
I will channel an excellent answer that one of my colleagues at Disney gave recently at another conference, and he said, "I'll do whatever Bob Iger wants me to do happily."
That's a good answer. So you were looking at the leadership at ESPN. Yep.
I was kidding, but
No,
I mean it's an interesting point.
He was just trying to put me in a difficult position.
Exactly. Just always entertaining at this hour of the afternoon. Seriously.
I do want to make one point about that too, because I'd like to say this publicly, honestly, and I'm not pandering here, but George Bodenheimer coming back to be involved in ESPN on a daily basis cannot be overstated. He's been such a tremendous influence on the company and our history, and he knows our people, and he knows our business, and he knows our culture, and it was, it was amazing for him to do that.
I'll say I've been in this business 20 plus years, and I don't know of an executive that has more respect and admiration than George Bodenheimer, so I second that. But
And it pisses me off that he could have been retired and be younger than me.
guy's got it going on.
Good. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
Seriously, the thing I'm looking at most carefully and apropos of this panel, I think that what is happening in streaming and OTT sports is absolutely the thing that is undergoing the most radical change. And I think if we're sitting here a year from now, there will be a whole bunch of things that will have happened that we couldn't have possibly anticipated.
I agree with that. And what I'm also looking at and actually seeing in this room is more women than I've seen in the past, but I would love to see more. And we heard a previous speaker at this conference talk about the fact that you need to be intentional in creating diversity of opinions, and so I would love to see more of that moving forward.
You've been in the business. Are you seeing some gains?
I am seeing some gains, but we need to persevere, because just because you see gains doesn't mean you take your foot off the pedal.
And the percentage of time you're the only woman in the room is?
It's less and less these days, which is exciting.
I think the important part on diversity, as far as we're concerned at ESPN, is that people need to start thinking of it as a business imperative, right? It's not about anything. I mean, you have to know your fans, and I was encouraged to hear the dialogue in the president's panel about this, because you can't possibly accomplish that without that around the table, right? Without a diverse group of people, a diverse group of points of view, and genders and races and everything. And if you realize that if you accept that your business will be better as a result, well, then that's all you need to think about.
And to your point, it is good at this conference to see a really diverse audience, because a lot of times it's not. So, well, a good session. They're all going to be sticking around, so if you want to say hi to them individually or introduce yourself, please do. Again, for Burke Magnus, Ed Desser, and Laura Froelich, have a great afternoon. Thanks a lot.